Hi, everybody. We are big fans of altered states around here and their healing potential. And a lot of our focus is on psychedelic medicines. But today, we're going back to the basics and we're going to talk about breath. That's right. You can get into an altered state simply by altering your breathing. So, have you heard of breathwork experiences, or have you seen videos of people online in the middle of a breathwork section who look like they're dying? I know, it's kind of scary. Well, this video will break down for you what is happening and help make sense of how breathwork can be a powerful modality for helping address everything from depression to migraines. So let's get into it. I want to start with the basics. Okay, I'm talking specifically about a practice called holotropic breathwork, which is a form of breathwork developed by Stan and Cristina Grof in the 1970s at Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California. Now, if you're not familiar with Stan Grof, I recommend you familiarize yourself with his work, especially if you're interested in psychedelic medicine. Stan Grof is one of the OGs in the psychedelic space. He's a Czech-born psychoanalyst turned LSD researcher and a pioneer in the field of psychedelic healing during the 1960s. He personally facilitated and studied over 4,000 LSD sessions in his lab at Johns Hopkins University. Now, Stan Grof is particularly interesting because he is a scientist through and through. Empirical data is king, and he is not one to make pronouncements without a boatload of data to back up his claims. Now, what happens when you put a scientist into the field of LSD research? You get an incredible mix of transpersonal and psychoanalytic theory articulated in a way that only Stan Grof can. I'm going to make some videos later detailing some of Grof's most interesting work, but I'm giving this background here so that you can understand just how rigorous this man's study was. When his lab was shut down to the new legislation that made psychedelics illegal, Grof shipped out to California and began to pursue other work in the realm of altered states, hence the creation of holotropic breathwork. The development of holotropic breathwork was not an arbitrary endeavor. This was studied and proven. Outcomes were quantified throughout 40,000 plus breathwork sessions he and his wife Cristina facilitated. So let's start with the name. What does holotropic mean? It derives from the Greek word holos and trepine, the former meaning whole and the latter meaning moving towards. So this translates into moving toward wholeness. So holotropic states are states that move us toward wholeness. I want to make a note here. So today you can find 100 different breathwork facilitators, each of them with their own twist on the process. The reason I'm talking about holotropic breathwork specifically is because this is the original therapeutic breathwork format. Whether these other breathwork processes know it or not, they come from this lineage and this practice. And you also might encounter people calling their work holotropic breathwork, but they're using the term generally and not adhering to the structure that the Grofs developed. So holotropic breathwork follows a specific process and has a specific framework for working with the psychic material that comes up. If you go to an actual holotropic breathwork session, this is what you will experience. So let's outline the essential elements so you have an understanding of what that looks like. First, we have breathing, obviously. Second, we have music. Third, supportive and nurturing physical contact. Fourth, mandala drawing. And fifth, sharing groups. We're going to go through each one of those and break that down so you understand what each section and element of this process looks like. So let's start with breathing. So what the heck is going on here and why does it work? In his writing, Grof gives us a long litany of all the cultures who used breath through the dawn of human history. He lays out all the evidence for breathing in ancient culture, both for spiritual development and physical healing. Suffice it to say, breathing is an ancient technique, and materialist science broke its connection to the psyche and spirit and has reduced it to simply a physiological function. This is evidenced by the fact that you or someone you know might think it's insane that your breath could actually be used to address some of the deepest psychosocial, psychospiritual problems facing you. So the breathing pattern for holotropic breathwork is super simple. It just involves deep breathing in and deep breathing out and speeding up the process so that you're essentially hyperventilating. The instructors I have practiced under describe it as a gas pedal. You can increase the intensity by breathing harder, foot on the gas, and you can let off the gas by slowing down the breath. There's also the format of breather and sitter. So in holotropic breathwork, you have one person who's breathing and one person who's sitting. The person who's sitting, their only job is to be there to support you, to lend a holding hand, to just be with you and to observe. And the breather is just breathing. This is actually one of the most profound aspects of this process because I found that being the sitter, you get just as much from watching the person breathe. And we'll get into why that is later because a lot of stuff comes up and it can be really intense and healing to watch a person go through that. So let's talk briefly about what is happening biologically. Breathing rapidly reduces the amount of CO2 in our blood, which increases the alkalinity of our blood and makes it so less oxygen is transferred to our tissues. If you follow Wim Hof, you have probably heard him say this. Additionally, breathing heavily resembles being very high up in the mountains where there's less oxygen, and the CO2 decreased by faster breathing. And this is my favorite part here. Okay, so breathing this way subjects our cerebral cortex, which is the youngest part of our brain, to stress, which inhibits neocortical functions, meaning the higher order reasoning, language, relationship to time, forward, backward. So higher order processes in the neocortical functions, which means that the older parts of our brain receive intensified activity, making the unconscious process more available and easily accessed. So this means we're getting into the places in our psyche that are beyond words. We'll come back to this because this is very important therapeutically. Okay, let's talk about music. So this was one of my favorite aspects when I did my first breathwork process. The first time I did the breathing and the music came on, I literally laughed out loud. I could not believe this was the music we were listening to. It was essentially trance music with deep bass-filled rhythms that put me, the breather, into a trance state. It was intense. I'm not going to lie, like really loud, evocative music. Grof describes the music as loud and evocative and really highlights the importance of entering the trance state. Cultures from across time have used rhythm and music to induce trance states for specific ceremonies, dances, processes of worship, and the music here is trying to recreate that. So the music essentially becomes a wave that the breather can follow to guide them through the journey. The music evokes emotion and it brings repressed memories to the surface and allows their expression. Grof writes that it is especially important for breathers to give into the music and to allow the expression of anything that comes up, including loud screaming, laughing, baby talk, animal noises, shamanic chanting, or talking in tongues. I know that might sound insane if you've never been in a space like this, but I promise it is real. And when we get into that unconscious material, it comes up. So the flow of the music in a holotropic breathwork session follows this arc. We have number one, opening music, then trance-inducing music, then breakthrough music, which is kind of the peak experience, then heart music, and then meditative music. The arc takes you through the whole experience and helps guide you through the journey. All right, let's talk about the next element, which is physical touch and releasing bodywork. Now, this is good stuff. This is where the transformation really happens for people. So remember what I said earlier about having access to the unconscious mind? This is where that comes in. So Grof writes, and I'm quoting him here, blocked physical and emotional energies, which are associated with various traumatic memories, are released and become available for peripheral discharge and processing. This makes it possible for the previously repressed content of these memories to emerge into consciousness and to be integrated. So when you breathe like this, you begin to experience tension throughout your body. The invitation is to go into that tension and to even intensifying it. And by sustaining these tensions for extended periods of time, the body consumes enormous amounts of energy and simplifies its functioning by disposing of them. You can almost envision like you are building up charge through the trauma that you're holding, the experiences that you're having, and an experience like holotropic breathwork, a very body-based experience, discharges all of that energy. So if sensations are coming up and they're not going away or being resolved, the direction is to intensify them. This is where physical touch from the facilitator or the sitter comes in. They work together, whether this is just like a hand on the head, a hand on the point of tension, so specific placing where you feel that, holding hands, or deeper muscle tissue work to help intensify the sensation. We're looking for spontaneous reaction to the situation to discharge the tension or sensations. Grof writes, and I quote here, the response should not reflect a conscious choice of the breather, but be fully determined by the unconscious process. So what is he talking about? Like I said earlier, this is the realm of the unconscious. This is a place that exists beyond language. This is the place that holds trauma that is pre-verbal and stored in our bodies. By going through this type of breathing, you turn off the ordinary ego-driven consciousness and you get access to deep material. When he says determined by the unconscious process, he means completely autonomic. If you've never experienced this or seen someone experience this, this is hard to comprehend. But take my word for it, your unconscious and autonomic nervous system holds so much. And if you give it the space, it will express the trauma and the charge it holds. Now, this is incredibly important for people who have trauma, especially pre-verbal trauma, meaning trauma that happens to you before you had language to describe what was happening to you. No account or no amount of talk therapy is going to give you access to these parts of your psyche. You have to access them through the body and through modalities like holotropic breathwork. And holotropic breathwork is not the only modality that you can do that through, but it's a great place to start if you feel like you have a lot of body-based trauma that you can't access through your frontal lobe and through verbally. It's not abnormal for people to regress to infantile states in these breathing sessions. And in the infantile state, they're able to relive the trauma they experienced, but they have the support of a caring and compassionate other, the thing that they did not have when they experienced it as a child. Grof writes, and I'm quoting him here, "Full age regression makes it possible to experience all the emotions and physical sensations of the original traumatic situation from the perspective of the child, but at the same time analyze and evaluate the memory in the therapeutic situation from a mature adult perspective." Now, again, if this seems really difficult to comprehend, I get it. If you haven't been in these places before, it seems unbelievable and hard to grasp, but trust me, it's real. When you get into places where you can turn off the ego, you will be astounded by the amount of material stored in the unconscious. Again, beyond language, sensation, experience, and feeling. Okay, so let's go to the next element, which is mandala drawing. Per usual, Grof details across time all the cultures who have used iterations of the mandala to represent deep spiritual and cosmic truths. This is why I love Grof. He goes back to the source material over and over and over again. So are you noticing a theme here yet? Holotropic breathwork is gathering of ancient and universal spiritual techniques and practices into one cohesive model for healing. I think that's pretty cool. So why the mandala? Well, let's go back to good old C.G. Jung. He writes, quote, "The severe pattern imposed by a circular image of this kind compensates the disorder and confusion of the psychic state, namely through the construction of a central point to which everything is related." Essentially, he's saying that creating art in a circle concentrates our confusion and connects us to the fact that everything is related. And in a mandala drawing, that relatedness coalesces in the center, concentrating our focus and simplifying that confusion our psyches feel toward the complexity of all things. Now, if you haven't experienced the calmness that comes from creating a mandala, stop this video right now and go do so. You'll be surprised by how good you feel afterward. All right, the final element of a holotropic breathwork session is sharing groups. So finally, the experience wraps up in a circle. And importantly, I mean a circle of people, you're sitting together and sharing. And importantly, these groups are not a time for interpretation or questioning. They're simply a time for the breathers to tell their story. This open format allows them to articulate their experience without having other people's biases projected onto their story. It is really easy to get caught up in interpreting symbols and occurrences, but we can't know that our interpretation matches theirs, so we leave it open. We allow each person to have this space to make sense of their own journey and to share. All right, so let's wrap it all up. I want to talk a little about my personal experiences. So I have sat in a number of holotropic breathwork sessions, and every single one of them has been profound. I can't emphasize that enough. Believe me, these sessions are every bit as psychedelic medicine. And I especially appreciate the fact that you can control the intensity at the beginning through regulating your breath, going back to that gas pedal on or gas pedal off. That's not a luxury afforded by many psychedelics. When you take that medicine, you're in, and there's not much you can do about it. You're on that ride, and it's going to end when it ends. So my experiences also end up being incredibly visual, like full-on visions that have given me tons of guidance for my life. I've met archetypal forces. I've met parts of me personified and embodied. I've gone to battle with the devil, which was just representing my self-hatred. And it was super intense. And the other thing about the holotropic work is that they are body-based experiences, all that stuff that I've talked about. So it's not just the visual experience. It is unlocking and accessing things that are stored in the body. When I went to battle with the devil, I accessed rage, repressed rage that I felt forever. That I've just stamped down and not allowed myself to feel. So I know that sounds intense. And if you've never been in these places, again, it's hard to comprehend what that could even be like. But I promise you, it is profoundly healing and cathartic experience. So if you're interested in altered states of consciousness and you're not quite ready to jump in with psychedelic medicine, this might be a perfect place for you to start. I'm biased. I would personally seek out a Grof-trained holotropic breathwork facilitator. But if you're comfortable with a different modality, trust yourself. Just give it a go. The reason I prefer the Grof modality is, again, he is so research-based, and he's taking ancient spiritual, cultural technologies and consolidating them into a framework for healing. I view him as kind of the lineage holder of all the modern breathwork movements, and I personally put a lot of respect and weight on lineage holders, but that's my bias. So anyway, find what works for you. That would be my recommendation. All right. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video if you like this channel. I release a video every Sunday morning, so come back next week for more content related to psychedelic medicine and psychospiritual development. As always, I appreciate you sharing your most valued resource with me, your attention. I hope you have a good rest of your day.